So I have a MacBook Air A2337 here with me today with a pretty badly water damaged connector. We're gonna replace that connector and hopefully that'll fix it. I'm going to show you how to replace the USB-C connector on a MacBook Air. This one's a MacBook Air, but it applies to a MacBook Pro or any of the newer models. Keep watching to find out how. So the board's on the bottom heater. It's set to 190 degrees Celsius, and hot air is set to 370 Celsius at 60 airflow. I'm using the bottom heater because it helps heat the whole board evenly. Otherwise, I just have to put a lot of heat in one spot. And especially when putting the connector on, I want to heat it as little as possible. So let's put some flux on the board. I'm going to switch on the air filter. Now, once again, my bottom heater is at 190, hot air is 370. I'm going to keep the hot air moving from left to right in order to make sure the whole port comes up to temperature evenly. And then once it melts, I should be able to lift the whole thing up and off. Like so. Excellent. Excellent. I'll change the polarity on the camera so that the reflections aren't so bad. There, that looks, we can actually see. Excellent. Okay, now I'm going to put some flux on the board. We're going to tin these pads with some fresh solder and then we'll braid it. Now, when I'm braiding the board, it's super important to not press down on the pads because if you scratch the PCB, then you may have to mask that area because otherwise you'll risk running bridges. And another challenge when installing this port is you can't access these pins from the outside because of the way the port's designed. So you got to make sure all the pins are attached without being able to touch them with an iron after. Wow. There's a hole in this board. We're going to quickly check with our multimeter and make sure there's no short circuits on those pins. So with the red probe on ground and the black probe on that line, we do not have a short. And that one might be normal. But yeah, so far so good. Okay, now next step is we'll zoom out. So I think that burn mark happened because of the electrical short, because of the water damage. So now I'm going to braid the board with some leaded solder. Sorry, I'm going to tin those pads with some leaded solder. Now the key here is to just hover the blob of solder using your iron on top of the pads, and that'll make sure the pads take as much solder as they possibly can. There might be one or two that are a little stubborn. You'll have to help them along by adding some extra solder as you have the iron over it. But In this case, it is extremely important that there is more than enough solder on the pins. Otherwise, when you put the port on, it will not work. All right, that is good. Let us clean it and inspect it. These pins on the bottom, they don't look like they've got enough solder on them, so I'm gonna quickly touch them up because it is not fun to try and attach those pins. I mean, you can't. You'll just have to take the port off and do the whole thing over again. Not worth it. Just do it right the first time. Okay, I think that's much better. All right, I think that is good. This guy is a little too solderific. There we go. The big ground pads and so on, those we don't really have to worry as much about because they're big enough that they will take more than their share of solder usually. Though I don't know if those big guys are ground or not. I don't think so. I think those might be vias. In any case, this is good. Board has enough solder. All right, now next step is let's harvest the port from a donor because we don't have new ones right now. So now because this is a donor board, I'm just gonna heat it from the bottom. Right now I have my hot air set to 430 Celsius at 100 airflow with no nozzle. So I'm blasting it with heat. But because I'm not blasting the connector with heat directly, it will not get hurt. Okay, so we have the board prepped and ready. We've salvaged the replacement connector from a donor board. Here it is on the microscope. Now, I have the board set on the bottom heater. I have the bottom heater currently set to 170 degrees Celsius. I'm going to apply some flux to this board. Now, the problem with connectors is if we put too much flux on the board, it will then get in the connector and it will cause a whole lot of problems. So it's best to put very little. So I'm gonna put a little bit of flux on here and then I'm gonna use my paintbrush to spread a thin layer on the pins, and that's all we need. That's all the flux we need. Now I'm gonna put this connector back on. If I can get my hands to work, there we go. So we're gonna line up the connector by hand first. And now we're gonna use a low temperature to flow the connector on. So we're gonna use, it needs to pause 1 second. So to put the connector back on, we're gonna use 330 Celsius hot air. at 60 airflow. And same as before, we're gonna move the hot air back and forth until the connector flows into place. Now, while keeping the hot air moving, I'm gonna nudge this connector just a little bit to make sure it is lined up. Oh, too much. There we go. Okay, so the connector is lined up properly. Now we're gonna press it. So by pressing it down, I was a little too forceful here, and the hot air makes the plastic soft, but the connector should still be okay. And pressing it down makes sure it makes good contact with the pads underneath it. So this connector should be attached properly. We're gonna clean it up, zoom in, and see if we can inspect the pins on the connector. Okay, so with the microscope at almost full zoom and an extra light, if we look at the pins, they all look lined up properly and they look attached as well. So I would say this is good. I am annoyed with myself about scratching the connector, but as you can see, that's not going to cause any problems. Okay, it looks good. Let us clean it and inspect it. So I'm going to turn off the bottom heater. We don't need it on anymore. Turn off the air filter or fume extractor. Board is too hot still. Let's zoom out a bit. Beautiful. That looks brand new. Excellent. Excellent. Let's turn it off. So we've just finished installing a brand new port on the water damaged MacBook Air. Let's plug it in with the flex cable, and we'll test it with the port tester first. We'll make sure that it's working, and then we'll test to see if the MacBook turns on. We've just changed the port on this MacBook Air, and I have a new port flex installed. Let's plug it in, and first we'll check the reading on the port tester. Excellent. As you can see, the port repair or the port FPC connector replacement was successful. Now let's plug it into a charger and see what its amp draw is like. We'll need to look at the amp meter. "19 volts, 10 milliamps. 19 volts is good. It might not be turning on because the battery is not connected. It looks like it tries to turn on, turns off, tries to turn on again, we're going to connect it with its battery and we'll check it. Okay, so with the MacBook board installed in its housing and the battery connected, I'm happy to show that the device now charges and it turns on. Let me show you. So it is charging and it is drawing 19 volts and 2.4 amps. Here, let's plug it in on the other side. And it shows it's charging and it has a good current draw. So this repair was successful after replacing the USB-C charging port connector on the motherboard. If you need motherboard repair services, you can contact us at repairtechrx.ca, or you can send us a message on Facebook or give us a call.